What is going on? Nick Tello here. Today, we're going to talk about dithering for 30 minutes straight. I hope you brought popcorn. Just kidding. We're going to talk about trap metal. So in the style of like Suicide Boys, Corpse, that like, it's like trap drums with guitars, with those really like vocal fry kind of vocals, the ones that are like, you know what I'm talking about. So this is the homie, Justice Hajaz. He's an amazing guitarist, amazing musician. He kills at vocals too. And I'm just going to play the song real quick, just so you can hear it real quick.
She said, pretty boy, pull my hair. Don't hold back and rip and tear. Baby girl, just beware. I can bite, but she ain't scared. Pretty boy, pull my hair. Grab my neck and leave it there. Where's your self-control? Did you leave it at the door? Can't help but to scream when you're pinned against the floor. Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act. Just wanna get tied up, say less please. Let's never give a fuck, oh yes please. Not up on some bullshit, but get down on your knees. Does what I say, but don't make it with these.
And then just in the interest of time, here's the guitar solo.
Grab my neck and leave it there.
So you get the idea. This dude fucking shreds, and I love that this is a thing now, that we can just not care about like boundaries. And I mean, typically, man, for someone, a guitarist as good as him, he'd be in like a band, with like live drums and bass. And I think it's so cool that it's more of like a produced track with like, samples and drum loops and, vocals that have like effects on them and really just unique. It's the most unique music in the world to me right now, aside from like hyperpop, which I've also done some videos on. So one thing that I want to stress about this is that this is a very well-produced track. And when you get tracks that are produced well and you hear that like, the drums don't need that much more punch to them, the guitar, the tone is already pretty good. With the exception of the vocals, I'd say in this case, less is more. That is the point I want to make to you. So when you're a mix engineer and people are sending you projects, and I've had this happen to me, where you'll hear it and you'll be like, I'm going to change this completely. I'm going to throw OTT on 100%, give it all this top end, and, you send it back to them and they're like, what did you do to this? You know what I mean? So when you're working with people, unless they specifically say like, go ham, I can't get it to sound how I want it to, you can change the sounds entirely, add as many effects as you can. It's going to make a lot more sense for you to take a more minimal approach and just fix the sounds, maybe add a little bit of reverb, and not necessarily just like change that stuff completely. And that'll keep you in the game for a long time if you're able to get what they give you and give them a better version of that. So in this case, you'll see I use on a lot of these sounds like 3 plugins, with the exception of the vocal chain. So I'm going to start with the vocal chain, but you'll see that in a second with the rest of the mix, how like when someone hands me a song that's produced well, I'm like, great, all right, sweet. Fab Filter, Pro Compress, Pro C, Soothe, and then like, you move on. That's how you get better at mixing, because you make better decisions, not unnecessary decisions. You get faster, your output increases, you're able to deliver more and more consistently, and you get the idea. So let's start with the vocals. I'm actually going to loop the verse because that's my favorite section, and I'm gonna just basically so first thing about the vocals is that you want to work on one vocal at a time, and then oftentimes I'll bust them to like a folder track, for example, and then, add some processing on top of that, and then I'll have like an all vocal folder and then add some processing on top of that. So just to clarify, I got my main vocal track right here, and then that's getting bussed to a folder, which is, has routing. So it's like, you can put plugins on it and put the tracks inside it. Love folder tracks. So I'll do some processing on the folder track, and then I will have an all vocal folder here, and then the all vocal folder has everything, including effects. Actually, no, the effects is actually going to the mix bus. Scratch that. But the all vocal folder has like a little bit of like some extra stuff. So real quick, I'm just going to, that's all right. So what I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna bypass all these plugins and put them on one by one so you can see my process, because this is what I always do. This is the best way to break up vocal chains. So first, let me just play it, just make sure. So the first thing you want to do is you actually want to raise your vocal higher than it kind of should be in the mix. I will raise it like 5 decibels or so. So let's hear that. Yeah. So we can obviously hear the vocals a lot louder now. So the first thing I do is I never assume that people record this stuff through like high quality gear. A lot of people record through, interfaces that are, not necessarily preamps. And a lot of times, like what I do to get sort of like a preamp sort of color, my favorite preamp is the Avalon, just because it just adds clarity to pretty much anything I put through it, without even touching the EQ. I didn't even touch the EQ. Wow, that's crazy. So, I'll do just a little bit of I'm literally just increasing the gain and running it through this preamp. And there's a little bit of a filter on there as well, but it literally just adds a little bit of juice to it in terms of like, it just gives it a little bit of a clearer sound. And it also, in my experience, smooths out the vocal just overall. So here's without it.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
And here's with it.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
Yeah, obviously it's a little bit louder, but it definitely has a little bit more clarity to it. So that's the reason why I use this plugin. So the next thing I do is I put a little bit of compression. So these first 2 plugins are my way of like simulating gear in the box. So like I have these 2 pieces of gear, and when I had a studio, I would always run my vocals through these 2 pieces of gear. So the first thing is, preamp, saturation, it's a plugin, and then just doing a little bit of compression here. So
it's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
Yeah, the trick with these like vocals that are very like, they're kind of quiet, you know what I mean? He's like, which is dope. Like I love that, but it's kind of quiet. So like the more we compress it, the more exciting it becomes. So that's why I do a lot of compression, just right off the bat.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
And yeah, like I talk about this all the time, but fast release times are ideal. When you have slow release times,
it's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
It's kind of pumpy sounding, so you don't really. Yeah, these are my default settings for the distressor. It's just half and half. Yeah, and a lot of times, like the distressor specifically adds a lot of like crunchiness to vocals, and I actually enjoyed the crunchy a lot. So here's without the distressor, and 6-to-1's kind of high, but again, like I'm honestly really trying to get these vocals nice and compressed sounding. So here's without it.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
Here's with it.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
It's a little smoother, right? It's a little bit flatter. So you got to make sure you're gain matching as well. So you tweak the output knob and just make sure it's the same volume coming out as it is coming in. So next thing, de-esser.
It's your self-control.
Just doing a little bit. And again, like I say this all the time, you really only want to see this thing move when there are S sounds happening. So, all right, a little bit of EQ.
It's your self-control.
Nothing crazy. Apparently, fuck that frequency. CLA 76.
Little baby, break your back.
All right, so for the CLA 76, so this is my second stage of compression. Again, I have settings that are my go-to settings. It's attack 6 and release 6. I find that stuff just, that brings the vocal forward. It doesn't absolutely murder the transients, and, it evens it out nicely. So here's without it.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
Here's with it.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it?
Ooh, someone didn't gain match that quite well. Words. It's fine. It's not that serious. So, but it is serious when you're trying to A/B and make sure that it doesn't just sound better to you because it's louder. So anyway, it's a little bit of compression on there. And then the next thing that I do always is multiband compression, because a lot of times when you add compression, it juices the mid-range up. And also, like, there's more mid-range than you need in this vocal to begin with. So this is typically what I'll do with the mid-range.
It's your self-control. Did you leave it at the door? Can't help but to scream when you're pinned against the floor.
So this right here, all this low stuff, we don't want to necessarily like zap it completely. We want our multiband compression to be reacting to it. And that's the point of multiband compression, is to, when it goes above the threshold, it says, okay, pull it down with these like set attack and release times, and it's gonna pull it down, it's gonna react to it, and it's not gonna make it so thin. It's not gonna be pulling out when it's not necessary for it to pull out those frequencies. So that's the point of multiband compression. So after that, this is something I do sometimes. I like putting transient shapers on my vocals sometimes, because especially for this very like attacky kind of vocal sound, he's like, you know what I mean? Like, it helps when you add a little bit of transient shaping to that. And I know what you're thinking, but Nick, why wouldn't you just make the attack time a little bit slower on the compressors? And you can do that too. This is what I do. I like evening things out, maybe potentially undoing a little bit of what I did with more plugins. That doesn't work for everyone. Works for me. I sometimes go in circles. So try this, and also try making your attack time slower. I just kind of feel it out, man. I kind of get in the zone when I mix, and I don't really think about these things too much.
It's your self-control, did you leave it at the door?
Here's without it.
It's your self-control, did you leave it at the door?
Here's with it.
It's your self-control, did you leave it at the door?
Yeah, so very subtle, but you got a gain match again with these. Yes. All right, so next thing I do is Soothe. This is a great plugin. I use this a lot on all my mixes, honestly. And it's also because I have like a custom PC with an i9 thing, and so it's really powerful, and I can get away with using Soothe on every track. But what this does is it basically evens out these annoying frequencies. It automatically suppresses the frequencies that are kind of resonant and overkill.
It's your self-control, did you leave it at the door? Can't help but to scream when you.
So this is very helpful because with these vocals that are kind of like more on the whispery side, you'll get a lot of harshness, and you obviously don't want that. So this is kind of taking care of some of that stuff.
It's your self-control, did you leave it at the door?
Yeah, and again, like I've gone over this before, the best way to use this plugin, like if you go to like the factory default preset, you just look at it and you look at what frequencies you want to take out. So obviously it's doing a lot here. I'll probably take the low cut off, and I'll be like, all right, so maybe it's doing a lot here. And if I know for a fact I want less mid-range, then it's like kind of the opposite of an EQ. Where you boost it is where it's suppressing, and then you don't want to do too much, so I'll try to turn the depth down. So that's usually how I'll set that up. And then, yeah, let me just go back to how it was. So next thing I'll do is a little bit of EQing. I did want a little more top end out of this. And this point of the mix is usually where I'll start doing some dynamic work. So dynamic meaning you don't necessarily want to cut these frequencies. Again, same thing as multiband compression. You want it to be lowering specifically when when it's offensive, when it's a problem. So here's one of them. That one sucks. Hate that. And then just a little bit of boxiness. Honestly, like it's not doing much. Okay. So next thing I do is I bring the backups into the picture. So one thing that I do, I'm gonna veer off of the vocal chain for just a second because it makes sense for me to talk about this right now. I have this thing called Revoice Pro, and this right here, I'm telling you, is the secret to my tight vocals. I get a lot of compliments on my tight vocals, and this is the motherfucking secret right here, Revoice Pro. So I'm just gonna play. So Revoice Pro, what you do is you, and I actually have my assistant Sean do this for me. What you do is you highlight this. You open this in Pro Tools. It works different depending on like what DAW you're using, how you do it. I have it here as a standalone. Check like right here. You can see it down there as a standalone. And what you do is you go to Audio Suite, and then you go to, this is actually already done, so it really makes no sense for me to do this right now, but you go to Synchro Arts, Revoice Pro APT, and then you hit the Capture Guide button. Wow, this is highlighted. And then you get nice and fast with it, and you got the key thing on. So I do the semicolon just to go down. And then you do Capture Dub, Capture, Spot, and it'll actually it'll match it. So like I said, this has already been done by my assistant, so it makes no sense for me to do that right now. But trust when I tell you that this is the key to tight vocals. You need some software. I don't care if you get VocalLine. I don't care if you get Revoice Pro. I mean, you could align it by hand. You'll save 20 hours if you spend the money on this plugin, though. I'll tell you right now. As soon as I bought this plugin, I was like, this is going to pay for itself in a week in terms of like time I saved. So the other thing that I do, and this is fucking clutch as well. So, all right, let's say the vocalist only sent one double. But as we know, if you follow me at all in my content, I always talk about left, right, center. So if you only have one double, you only got a left. So what you do is, So it depends on if you have this plugin or not. I'm going to say it right now, but there are other plugins, but so Quick Doubler again, this right here is a secret weapon. So what you do, capture, select the section below, spot, and just like that, you have a double. What it does is it has an algorithm, and it'll move the timing off a little bit on certain syllables. It'll change the pitch on stuff. It's an algorithm, and it synthesizes a double for you. And so this entire, let me just play just the left and the right, just so you can hear the difference between the left is like the OG, and then the right is the synthesized double. So let's listen to those right now.
This is self-control. Did you leave it at the door? Can't help but to scream when you're pinned against the floor. Little baby, bring it back. Good girls don't know how to act. Just want to get tied up. Say.
You would never know that shit is synthesized, the one on the right. And I did hear the little artifact. I know what you're thinking. That little artifact, that's the game you play. I mean, I didn't hear it in the mix, so I never fixed it. But but that's the thing. Like that's when you're playing with these plugins, you're playing with fire just a little bit because artifacts can come up. But you hear that, you know, and now when you play them all together, it sounds like 3 vocals. It doesn't sound like 2 vocals and a synthesized doubler.
This is self-control. Did you leave it at the door? Can't open.
Oh, you low-key could hear that artifact, but you couldn't hear it in the mix, and that's all that matters. You could hear it when it's boosted 5 decibels like I have it, but okay, bet. So that's an important lesson there, is that, like, you know, if something isn't a problem, if it doesn't stand out to you, then fuck it. You know, it's not that serious, and that's how you end up, like, wasting your whole life trying to finish records that are at like 90%, and you won't finish them because they're at 90%. It's like, you know, it's because you obsessed over the little things. So anyway, that's enough for that philosophy lesson. So let's go back to the vocal chain. So next thing I do is a distressor.
This is self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
It's great because it kind of like glues the vocals together a little bit more. So especially when you have multiple vocals there. And then same kind of settings too, you saw.
This is self-control. Did you leave it at the door?
Yes.
Can't open to scream.
Okay, cool. So let's pick a different section, because now that artifact is kind of bugging me just a little bit. So let's go here.
Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act. Just want to get tied up. Say less, please. Let's never give up.
Yeah, literally just lowering the mid-range. And then, so one thing that I do is I add OTT on, and OTT is great. I wouldn't recommend it all the time because it will change sounds drastically if you're not careful. But the best thing about it is that it really just kind of like gives you what you want if you're trying to get your vocal to sound a little more clear sounding, honestly, and a little less mid-rangey. Granted, that's what you're going for.
Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act. Just want to get tied up.
Day and night. So when you first throw the plugin on, it'll tell you 100%, or it'll just default to 100%. That's what this sounds like.
Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act.
It sounds wild. You wouldn't want that. So I'll usually do like anywhere between like 5 to 30%, sometimes like 4%. But
little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act. Just
you can hear that that's enough. Yeah.
Give a fuck. Oh yes, please, little baby, break your
yeah. So next thing that I do, so I actually have another OTT on here because I'm crazy.
Little baby, break your back.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I want it. And then
please, let's never give a fuck. Oh, yes.
Just an EQ. Just I use this EQ a lot just because I like the air and I like the mid range. It's not a very subtle EQ, but for when you're trying to take your vocal across the finish line, it's perfect. So that's what I'll do.
Baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act.
Just adds a little more air on there. So
give a fuck. Oh yes, please.
And then so check this out. This is another thing I do. So one thing that's fucking dope. I encourage everyone to do this, especially if you're in the space of like super experimental music. You know, like emo rap or trap metal or whatever. So what you do is you specify that you want to bypass this in the automation. In Pro Tools, it's like that. In other things, in other DAWs, you don't have to do that necessarily. And then what I do is I have this here and I have it automated so that the EQ only turns on at the end of that phrase there. And then I have just a filter. It's literally just a telephone filter. I don't really fuck with this one that they do because it's like, it literally just makes it sound bad. Like this frequency sucks. This frequency sucks, this frequency sucks, but that's what helps it cut through because those are very like resonant frequencies. So I made my own filter and it looks like this. I opened up the top end a little bit and I don't have any of those resonances. It's a little bit more of a band pass. But yeah, anyway, so that's what this sounds like.
Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act. Just want to get tied up. Say less, please. Let's never give a fuck. Oh yes, please, little baby.
Yeah. So that is it for the vocals. One thing I will say is that I do shoot out my reverbs very often. I have this on here, Vox Verb, and then what I'll do is I will turn this up louder than it needs to be, and then I'll go in.
Baby, break your back. Your girls don't
I'll be like, all right, do I like the verb suite? Do I like, I think I tried this one. Manny verb. Do I like R verb? So I went with the plate because I love this Slate CLA AL2 box verb. And again, like, I cannot tell you why I went with this. I can tell you it's because it's the cleanest sounding actually with the vocal. But it's very hard to describe like why one reverb works over another. That's why I like always shoot out my reverbs. And I think that this one, it worked because it's very like clear sounding. And a lot of times like reverbs, depending on what reverb you're using, it'll like amplify resonances and you'll have to like do a ton of EQ work to it. And a lot of like good reverbs don't do that. You know what I mean? Like if you're working with a bad reverb, it'll do this shit. You know what I mean? It'll have like a section in the frequency range that's super resonant for no reason, and you're just like, well, this reverb sucks. So like the less you have to do that, the better your reverb is going to be, the less work you're going to have to do, and the less it's going to muddy up your mix. So, and again, like you can see, like I did still lower like this frequency range, for example. So like I always EQ my reverbs after the fact. So yeah. Cool. That's it for reverbs. That's it for doubler. One thing I will say is that I actually didn't use delay. This is actually not very common for me, but I didn't use delay on this because this is kind of one of those mixes where, like I said, less is more. I want to keep my mix up front as possible, and the delay was just cluttering things up. So that's why I did not add delay to this song. Like here's like if I had added delay, this is what it would have sounded like.
Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act. Just want to get tied up. Say less, please. Less, never give a fuck. Oh yes, please. Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act. Just want to get tied up.
You know what I mean? Like it just takes away from like the punctuality of the words that he's saying. You know what I mean? So that's why I said fuck delay on this song, with the exception of like the ad libs. So anyway, now let's bring the vocals back down into the mix.
Little baby, break your back. Your girls don't know how to act.
Yes. Okay. All right. So one thing I will say about this beat is that, like I said, Justice is good at producing in terms of like, you know, picking out samples and getting things that just sound clean in general, and also a guitar tone. So you really don't have to do much. And when you know what you're looking for, you know how you want things to sound. In general, you don't have to do a lot more. If you kind of scan my processing, you could see a lot of what I did was just basic EQing. None of this is even worth going into, because look, all I did in a lot of cases, maybe I'll boost the mid-range, maybe I'll do a little bit of compression, I'll do maybe some saturation on certain things like, you know, hi-hats and, you know, loops that I want to have more energy. Maybe I'll do a little bit of this, a little bit of soothe, you know, literally just, you know, fab filter and soothe, and, you know, the guitars I'll go into a little bit more. But this is the point I want to make to you, is that, you know, when you get these things that are produced well, you can literally just throw fab filter. And when I say throw, I don't mean like do it carelessly, but like you literally just throw like 2 plugins on there, get it to sound how you want it to sound, you know, get it in the pocket mix wise, maybe add some I actually did add a lot of reverb to a lot of this stuff, just to give it some ambience. But, you know, you don't have to overdo it, and you don't have to like kill your mix with like, you know, processing and plugins and this and that. So yeah, I use OTT on a lot of stuff, especially things that I want to sound a little more like, you know, clear and a little less like mid-rangey, and maybe a little more, you know, with a little more high end. So, you know, but the whole point I want to make is that you see here, like it's like literally like 4 plugins. It's like Fab Filter, Pro C, Soothe, and then OTT in some cases. And that's literally all you got to do. Mixing is really an art, and there's different ways to approach it. And in a lot of cases, like I'll hear a sound immediately and I'll be like, do I even need to do anything with this other than maybe cut the low end and compress it slightly? So that's huge. When you're mixing and you get to a certain point, there's no need to overmix. One thing I will say, get good tools and understand fully how to use those tools. Fab Filter is my lifeline. Same with Pro C. Like these 2 tools right here, I use on everything, and I can get something to sound exactly how I want in like less than 30 seconds in a lot of cases, just from having good tools and knowing how to use my tools. All right, so let's talk about this drum loop. So when you get drum loops, it's a very interesting thing, because you can only do so much with a drum loop to try to get it to sound how you want it to sound, because of the fact that you're working with multiple samples inside. So what I do is here's what I do. I automate my reverb on just during the snare. So I have a reverb set up on a bus, and you'll see it right here. You'll see it turning on just on the snare.
Where's your self-control? Did you leave it at the door? Can't help but to scream when you're pinned.
Yeah, so you see I'm really only having this reverb turn on just on the snare hit, you know what I mean? So that's one thing that I do. I didn't really talk about the exciter too much. So the other thing that I do is, because of the fact that we have different hi-hats happening in different sections of the song, I have to basically I actually wanted a little more top end out of the hi-hats. So I have Neutron's exciter on here,
Boy, pull my hair.
adding a little bit. Here's without it.
Baby girl, just beware. I can bite, but she is scared. Pretty boy, pull my hair, grab my neck.
And then here's with it.
Boy, pull my hair, don't hold back and rip and tear. Baby girl, just beware. I can bite, but she is scared.
So I wanted a little more top end out of the hi-hats, so I have that going on just there. And then one thing that happened though is that he brought in a different hi-hat in the loop here, so I had to bypass that because with it was too much.
Where's your self-control?
So with this hi-hat, that exciter was just a little bit too much. So here's if I had added that exciter during this verse.
Where's your self-control?
It's a little bit too crispy. So here's,
Can't help but to scream
yeah.
when you're pinned against
So
the floor.
that's what you gotta do. You gotta have yes, I wanted an exciter in the section that had those a little bit more, a little bit lower in the frequency spectrum hi-hats, and then I bypass the exciter when when the crispier hi-hats come in, because I don't want to overdo it. And then it looks like here I actually had some C4 happening as well. So I basically I had to actually compress that top end in just that section. So I automate this little band. I automate the C4, the multi-band compression on just for when those hi-hats come in.
Where's your self-control? Did you leave it at the door? Can't help
Yeah,
but to scream.
so that helps with that. And then real quick, I just want to talk about this. So this is a great way to add more clarity to your hi-hats. It just adds a little more you know what I mean? If I was to overdo it.
Where's your self-control? Did you leave it at
Yeah, so it's a great tool for when your hi-hats are doing, are not doing enough in the top end specifically. So, all right, so for the 808, again, I didn't do so much with the 808, but what I did do, let's see it. So the 808, one thing that I did do actually was that I actually I actually doubled up on the 808. This isn't something I normally do, but I basically sent it
self-control? Did you
to another bus.
Can't help but to scream when you're pinned.
We're about to have to solo this because I never work on my bass in solo, but for you to be able to hear it, you're going to want to hear it in solo. So here's with it. Or I mean without the vocals. So here's the 808. So here's how it was originally. And then here's with the added, I basically have it going to a bus with a little bit of distortion, and I'm cutting the lows significantly as well as some resonances. So here's with this added in. Actually, let me do it without again. And then here's with it. So it's typically I'll cut the lows because I don't want to double up on the low end, but in this case, honestly, I just left it, man, with these with these trap Suicide Boys Corpse type songs. I mean, you can get away with overdoing it on the bass a little bit. So I just left it in. I did lower the low end by 5 decibels, but I didn't cut it entirely because I felt like busting it, and then basically doing a parallel distortion without even cutting all the low end just added a lot more beef to the song and the arrangement overall, because this actually plays into another point that I want to make. When you only have so many elements, and when your music is based around drum samples, an 808 and a vocal, your 808 has to knock. Your 808 is the equivalent to a rock band's entire rhythm section in this case. That's why trap, the 808 is so loud, because the 808 is the whole ass point. Listen to Backseat Freestyle by Kendrick Lamar. It's literally a vocal and an 808 and a bell sample way in the background. And the reason that song knocks is because the 808 hits like it should. So that's why your 808 has to be priority, and you can make it louder than it should be, in this case, because it's so important to the mix overall. Moving on, so let's talk about the guitars real quick. So with the guitars, let's play the solo for a second. So like you don't want to mess up someone's guitar tone too much. That's playing with fire. You know what I mean? You don't want to hand them something that's like, what did you do? Unless they're specifically hiring you to like reamp or for your like tone abilities. So what I did here, let's see what I did. I know I didn't do a lot. I know that everything I did was mainly like housekeeping. So here's my entire thing. I'll break it down for you. And again, like Soothe, this is why having tools that work amazing, that you know how to use, is key to making it and mixing. So a little bit of Soothe. What it's doing is just lowering, it's kind of just evening out some of these resonances, I want to say. Let me just loop that one section. Yeah, and the guitar didn't really have as much top end as I would like. So, you know, what I do in a lot of cases is I'll actually cut from the mids, and that'll bring the top end out more. So, or I could just EQ it. Wow. Yeah, that's it. I added an EQ there just to bring that out. And then here's one thing that I did. I actually added OTT on top of this because I knew that it would do exactly what I was just describing, where it would add just a little bit more top end in. So here's with the OTT. You know what I mean? Like, it would bring out that top end a lot, but I'm not in the business of, like, you know, changing people's tone entirely. So here's just with a little, here's without it. One more time, here's without it. And then here's with it. You know what I mean? So, and then one more thing I did is I just added Soothe here, just to even out some of those kind of like mid-rangey frequencies again. Yeah, that's all it is. One thing I will say, all right, so here's a trick for when your guitar doesn't actually have the top end that you want. Sometimes like you'll get guitars that cut out at like 5K. So what you can do is you can actually add some like tape saturation to just the top end. That's the hack for when you get guitars that are too mid-rangey and don't have enough like distortion in the top end, is you throw an exciter on there. But we're not gonna do all that for this mix. I did that on some of his other mixes actually, but not on this one specifically. So all right, moving on. One more thing I want to talk about is sidechaining the vocals. So sidechaining the vocal, I actually have a way where I, as you can see, sidechain it here over to Soothe, which is a great plugin actually. So I have it here on the guitar bus, on the rhythm guitar bus specifically. So what this does is it kind of you know, cuts out, doesn't really cut them, but it suppresses some of those mid-range frequencies. So you'll see here I have the, you know, the key input as the vocal sidechain, and then you gotta have this switched on, and then it'll cut this stuff out only when the vocal is present. Only when the vocal is present. So that's the kicker, is that it has to be when the vocal is there that actually acts on it. So you can see that the frequencies it's sucking are all the frequencies that are conflicting with the guitar in the vocal.
Down on your knees. That's what I say, but don't make it with these. Okay, princess, let's go play.
Yeah. So that's the whole point there. And actually, I don't even think this was the right Soothe. I think it was actually this one. So let's watch this one real quick. Yeah.
Get down on your knees. That's what I say, but don't make it with
yeah, so this just kind of helps them play nicely together. Like, you don't necessarily want to like do subtractive EQ that just pulls all those frequencies down. You kind of, that's why it helps to have these tools that are specifically like you can sidechain and it's going to duck frequencies down only where the two are clashing. So that's what I did there. And then real quick, I want to talk about the mastering, my process for mastering. So what I'll do, first thing I want to do is I want to pull up like a metering thing. So before anything at all, yeah, so it's hitting around like minus 4.3. I like it hitting around like, ooh, it's going kind of high. I like it hitting like between minus 5 and minus 6. So I have this gain plug in here to kind of bring it a little bit lower, you know, a little bit lower. And then the first thing I do is some bus compression. And I'm pretty subtle with it because I'm a big fan of like stacking compressors, whether it's vocals, whether it's in the case of like, you know, mastering here. So I'll just do a little bit. These are my settings, like attack of 10, just so it doesn't zap the transients entirely. Release of fast, very fast, just because it's going to be less pumpy sounding and a little bit more transparent. And I'm kind of just tapping it on the bus compression. not doing too much. Next thing I do is standard clip. So this is a great plugin right here. This is a great for like, what it does is it literally clips it, and this is cool. So I'm just kind of using Soft Clip Classic here. Here's what it'll sound like if you murder it. It's just distortion, you know what I mean? So what I'll do is I'll kind of have it so that you could see it, like you could see the red. It's kind of just operating on the transients. It's basically it adds a little bit more punch and distortion to the kick. So that's the whole point. And then I add the saturation into the picture as well. This plugin costs $25, or I don't know, it's $30, $25. Highly worth it, especially in mastering. And I mean, I've used it on like hi-hats before. It's great. It's a great plugin. So next thing I do, and I always do this, is I just add a little bit of like a 12K. So usually 12K, 16K is great just for adding a little bit more shine onto your mix. So what I'll do, what do I want more of? Do I want more of that? Do I want more of that? And then I'll kind of just bring it up a little bit, you know, not too much. Next thing I did, I just fixed the gain a little bit, and then Oxford Inflator is a great plugin. It kind of just makes things louder. What you do is you set the ceiling to like where you want to be peaking. So in my case, I guess minus 0.6. You drive the input a little bit. I usually drive it until it's kind of in the orange, and then you do this little effect thing, and it kind of just makes it louder. Watch. Some bullshit, but get down on your knees. That's what I say, but don't make it with these. I think what it does is it basically just enhances the harmonic content that's there and makes it louder. Like you'll notice, like when you drive this a little bit more, the lufts will go up because it makes it louder without peaking. It's very similar without peaking louder. It's very similar to a limiter. So yeah, that's what I do. I don't do this in every mix, and they actually recommend you do more. You do like 100% effect, but I usually just tweak it, and I don't go crazy with it. Next thing I do is I just do a little bit of width on the top end. And there has to be top end information for this to work, but I just kind of use this stock air thing to just add a little bit more to the top end. Bro. You see what I'm trying to do right now? Yeah, there we go. Okay. And then the next thing is ozone. So what I do very minimal EQ work. I'll maybe bring this out because it's going to bring out the vocals just a little bit. I think the hi-hats were a little wild, so I kind of brought this top end down slightly. And then here's something you do for when you got a lot of like bass and 808 and you want to actually drive your limiter a lot more, is that you can actually compress just the low end, and it's going to make your kick like and your 808 distort less. You're gonna be able to bring your mix louder, avoiding the distortion. We all know what happens when you like, you know what I mean? So like to avoid that, you can just have this on, and then it'll just compress just the low end. That's what I say, but yeah. And then dynamic EQ. So this is great in mastering. This is actually this is highly underrated in mastering because these frequency ranges will get kind of like juiced up a little bit too much. So you can kind of have this reacting to them. That's what I say. Yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of a telephonic frequency. Kind of another telephonic frequency. And then again, what I do, I say again because I always talk about this, but I actually, like I said, I double up on compression. So I'll do like vintage limiter with a maximizer, and that'll really help overall with getting things much more dialed in and less like compressed or limited sounding. So that's the secret trick. I'll usually do like around this much. I usually don't touch the ceiling on this. I'll match the character to the maximizer. Then I'll just a lot of this stuff, honestly, like I'm gonna level with you guys. I use Mastering Assistant just to get some of these settings out of the way, because what it does, like I know what I like and I know what I don't like when it does. Let me know if you want me to do like a true like mastering video, and I will. But yeah, for this, I mean, I just kept it kind of simple. I don't really do too much. And one thing, this is a huge topic of debate, but I try to hit my peaks around like max of like minus 0.5. True peak is like, it'll kill the transients, but in a lot of cases, like you'll kind of need it just to avoid it from going like above 0 or whatever. So like, this This is where I was hitting kind of like around like minus like 7-ish. That's usually what I aim for. And then if you turn true peak on though, off, it'll peak above 0 and the kick will go too loud. So what the true peak does is it does like kind of clip the kick a little. Like it doesn't clip it. I don't know what it does, but like it shaves off the transient of the kick. In this case, it didn't take away from the punch, so I left it. But in some cases, like I will avoid true peak at all costs because it'll kind of like flatten it out and make it sound just not as punchy. So in this case, it worked. As you can see, I kind of hit my numbers pretty easily, and I'll tell you why. Like I'm only driving this like to minus 7.3, which is not a lot in a lot of cases. I'm only driving this minus 2.7. I hit my number very, very easily. I know with a lot of you guys, especially with 808s, sometimes you'll find it hard to get to that minus 7 without it distorting. And a big reason why I was able to pull this off, and this is what I've learned through years of trial and error, is because I got the bus compression into the standard clip. These are all tools that play a role in making it louder. You know, the bus compression into the standard clip, into the Scarlxrd inflator, into 2 limiters, and that, my friends, is how you hit that minus 7 easily. You know what I mean? And you're not pulling your hair out because it's distorting and you can only get it to like minus 9. We've all been there. So that's the trick. Do that, and you'll have a much better time. Cool. So that's it for this video. Hope you learned something new. I fuck with this song heavily. Please check it out. This shit is the future. And I will see you guys on the next one. Thank you so much for watching.